So this is my last live before I go into the weekend. I am going to try and have some time off. It's been a really, really big week. But before I do that, I wanted to just cover off on some information about nightmares, just because this has come up such a lot for so many of my clients recently. So now, obviously, the purpose of this live is not to stop your nightmares. Unfortunately, I can't do that just over a live. But what I'd really like to do is to give you some information that will help you, some things that you can do to help you if you are having nightmares, particularly in relation to a traumatic event. So they'll be connected to your post-traumatic stress or your complex post-traumatic stress. And what I find with everything related to trauma is that once you understand something, you understand why it's happening, and what its purpose is, what your body and mind are actually trying to do, it makes it so much easier to actually deal with it. So, nightmares. Okay, so let's talk about nightmares, why you have them, where they come from, and then most importantly, once you've got that understanding, what you can do to try and control them. Okay, so really the purpose of your nightmares, it goes back to, it's your primeval brain. You could take it back to really cavemen, when we were living in caves, and the purpose of the part of your brain called the amygdala, which was very, very active then and is still far too active now for the life that we live, is your fear reaction. So the whole point of the amygdala is to work out if something should be scary, if you should be afraid of something or not. And what happens let's take this back to caveman times. So there was a lot to be afraid of. Okay, so what would happen, the amygdala would stay in a heightened state of fear because you didn't know when the next fierce animal was going to come along. You didn't know when another clan was going to come and attack you. And the amygdala stayed in this heightened sense, whether you were awake or whether you were asleep. It was obviously a very anxious time to make you aware of the dangers around you. Now, obviously, we don't have to live like that anymore, but your amygdala has not changed. And this is where the problem comes in with your nightmares, because really what your mind is doing, your mind is keeping you safe by reminding you of an event that happened that was harmful to you. And what it's really saying is, oh, don't forget about this, because this is what happened. And if you go back into this situation, it's going to happen again. So it's all part of keeping you safe. The unfortunate thing about that is, in your logical mind, you know that you're safe. You're not about to go back into that situation, but your amygdala, in the trauma, your amygdala became heightened. It became overactive to just cause this massive fight or flight response in you, to release huge doses of fear hormones, cortisol, adrenaline. And actually what happens is your amygdala has become stuck in that pattern. And what happens is it sees danger everywhere, even where logically there is no danger. Now, normally the amygdala, the fear response, is connected to your frontal cortex, which is all about, this is where your logic, your planning, your calm, and your reasoning all happen. And normally the amygdala and the frontal cortexes are connected and they balance each other, and you're able to reason and work out. And if the amygdala jumps in and tries to tell you that something is scary, you're able to then use your front lobes, come in and say, oh, actually, no, it's not. That might have happened before, but it's not happening now. That's all in the past, and everything just calms down. And what happens when the amygdala becomes heightened like that? The amygdala becomes heightened, and you end up with this fear response that is constant, it's consistent, and it's out of proportion But what happens is the frontal cortex, their function actually becomes dampened. So you've got one that's heightened, one that's dampened, and then they disconnect. And what you end up with, where you've got this post-traumatic stress and this complex post-traumatic stress, is literally the amygdala. It's like it's gone crazy. It's working on its own. It's unregulated. It's seeing fear everywhere, and there is nothing to regulate it. And the only way you could deal with that is to understand what's happening and literally take steps to jump in and take control, and literally to reason with the fear response is what you would have to do. But the problem is, because you don't realize that this is happening, the amygdala is just left to run wild. And for people, this goes on for years. So what happens, of course, even if, let's say when you're awake, you have some degree of control and the amygdala quietens down. Obviously, then what happens once you're asleep, there's no control. There's no frontal cortex is here balancing the amygdala, and it starts to go crazy again. And what it does, it gives you nightmares. It uses your sleep. It uses your dreams to remind you of what you need to be afraid of. And even in your logical waking mind, if you know you don't need to be afraid of this, you're asleep and you can't do anything about this. And this is where your nightmares come in. So it's literally a fear response that has gone crazy in reaction to a trauma. I try and put these things, I mean, the brain, it's got all sorts of complex parts, and, you know, we can make it so complicated. But I try to put this in a simple way that you can understand. Because if you kind of understand, okay, this is what's happening, you've got some chance of taking control. So now that you understand that that's what's happening, hey, I'm going to say hello to a few people. Thank you, Sherry, Molly. Oh, and Chrissy's joined. Oh, Chrissy, great, because I know that you had some concerns about this. So yeah, leave me some questions, please. Join in. Leave your questions, and I'll try and see them. There's only me here, so I'm trying to talk and look. But I want this to be relevant for you. I know what I want to say, but if you might have things that you need to know outside of this. So literally what we need to do, if you just think of this in simple steps now. So the amygdala, the fear response has gone crazy. There's nothing regulating it, and it's using your sleep to bring to your attention what it thinks is a danger to stop you going back to that danger. That's the easiest way of saying it. But you know that this is not a danger to you anymore. You have no intention of going back into that situation. So what you want to do is we need to start to calm the amygdala. That's what we're doing. That's the way I want you to think about it. And even if you wrote down, make some notes, go back over this, I need to calm my amygdala. Okay, so where we're going to start with that is your breathing. I've said this before about all anxiety, breathing is amazing. I want you to do, as this fear response comes up, this is before you go to sleep. This is things you can do to try and calm your amygdala before you go to sleep, okay? And you can do it as well, before we get onto that, when you're awake. Any kind of anxiety and fear that comes up, again, recognize that this is your amygdala stepping in, that this is a fear response. And I'm going to move on to the second step, but so we do the breathing. Anytime you feel fear and anxiety, but to calm the amygdala before you go to sleep. One of the things I want you to practice is deep breathing. A couple of minutes of really deep breathing. This isn't the breathing in the chest. This is the breathing that I want in the stomach. I want you to take 4. I want you to count to 4 as you breathe in, which fills the stomach. I want you to hold it for 4, let it out for 4, and hold it for 4. What this does, what has happened, your heightened amygdala is taking too much air. It's causing shallow breathing, and not enough oxygen is actually going to these frontal cortexes, which we need to get the amygdala to reconnect with. And we need these frontal cortexes to move from their dampened state back into more of a balance. So we want the amygdala to calm down, the frontal cortexes to come up, and one of the ways we can do it is breathing. Because when you do this really deep, slow breathing, what happens is you get more oxygen into the body, and at the moment, the frontal cortexes, they're partly disconnected and dampened because they are not getting enough oxygen. So when you start to take these deeper, slower breaths, more oxygen is going to these frontal cortexes that we want to engage to start to balance the amygdala. So that's one of the things you can do. The other thing you can do is, now that I've told you that this is all about the amygdala, great, Emily, good. Well, hopefully Emily says she's trying to get control of this, and hopefully, see, sometimes you're trying to get control of something, but you don't know what is happening, you don't know why something is working as it is, and you're trying to get control of it without really knowing what you're doing, and that's not your fault. Absolutely not. But that's why I'm sharing this, to try and help you. So the breathing. The second thing you can do when you know that this is your amygdala's fear response, I want you to notice it. I want you to notice the response, whether this happens at nighttime as you're starting to go to sleep, whether this happens anytime you start to feel anxious or fearful. Notice the response and actually ask yourself, what is this fear about? Okay, what am I being told to be aware of here? And sometimes you won't know. Your amygdala is operating in this heightened state, and it is seeing fear and danger where there is nothing to fear and no danger. This is how people become agoraphobic, because the amygdala just tells them that everything outside is super scary. And they start to believe it because they've got no way of reasoning it because of this disconnect between the two parts of the brain. But if you can, when you start to feel this fear, if you can actually start to ask yourself, what is this about? Now, if you can recognize it, you can then start to reason with it. Okay, so let's say you're being told, oh, don't go over there because you might get hurt. Let's just say that for example. Then your job is to look at this and kind of acknowledge it and say, yeah, thank you for that. I understand that people have been hurt over there before, but that is not likely to happen. So I don't need this alert. And this is how you start to reason. Because what you'll start to find is most of what you are being told has nothing to do with your present situation. It's either to do with your past, or it's to do with an anticipation of the future. And what we really, really need to do, it's a type of mindfulness where we bring everything into the present and you reason it from where you are at now. And you will find that almost everything that your amygdala is bringing up has nothing to do with where you are at now and what is likely to happen. And in this way, you can start to get control of this fear response and restore this balance. And you'll find as you restore the balance, as you start to do this, it will become easier because your frontal cortex processes will happen automatically. Whereas in this disengaged kind of state, you have to make it happen. You have to bring things under control yourself by recognizing what's happening. Now, the other way you can help yourself with your nightmares is literally to change the ending and change how you see yourself within this situation. So what you can do, if you are going to sleep feeling afraid thinking about something that happened to you, thinking about how vulnerable you were, how powerless you were, how terrible this was, how strong this other person was, all these negative things, and I'm sure you will recognize the ones that relate to you. What you can do in your mind, you see, your mind reacts to the words and images that you feed it. So you've got an amygdala that's running wild here. You're feeding into it literally by confirming and reconfirming. Yes, I'm powerless. Yes, I'm vulnerable. Yes, I'm going to get hurt. Yes, this person was too strong. Whatever. And what I want you to do is start to change that. Change the words and images that you're using, and literally change the ending of whatever happened, okay? And change it to a way that supports you. You can change it in a way that sees what happened not happening for whatever reason. You can change it so that you see yourself as someone strong who got away. You can change it in a way that sees you as being rescued by someone else. But these are all positive thoughts, words, and images that you are going to feed your mind. Now, don't get me wrong, this is all about empowering yourself. And it is not easy. This is not going to happen overnight. But it's like with everything we do with neuroplasticity, your brain is elastic. It's plastic, and you can mold it, and you can change the outcome of things by the words and images that you feed it. And you will have to do this consistently, and it will take time. But there are these exercises that you can do, especially now that you understand there are things that you can do. Now, I do want to tell you very quickly, obviously in the RTT therapy that I do, why this is so powerful and why dealing with your nightmares, if people don't have them, that's fine, but if you have nightmares, it's definitely going to be part of the work that I do with you. And if I don't work on it specifically with you, but I would if you requested it or if we thought it's what you needed, because everything is bespoke. But everything that I do is about how you see yourself. So you can imagine that if I'm totally empowering you to take control and to understand and move forward with every area of your life, we are automatically going to upgrade you in these nightmare situations, and they are not going to have the effect on you that they would, because you are automatically seeing yourself now as someone who is stronger and more capable. But what would happen if we deal with them in an RTT situation, we are going to deal with the nightmares very, very specifically. Number one, we're going to, the tool that I would use is role, purpose, function, and intention. And what we would do, we would question the mind about the role of the nightmare. And we would find out that it's to protect you. The function is to keep you safe. The intention might be to bring to your attention something you need to deal with. The role, purpose, function, intention, they're very similar. And what we're going to do, we're going to uncover what the mind thinks the role, purpose, function, and intention of these nightmares is. And then we're going to tell it that we don't need these anymore. We're going to absolutely make it clear that this is in the past. We're only focusing on the present and the future. This is who you are now. And we're going to tell your mind that you're stronger, you're in a different situation. This situation doesn't exist anymore. It was a long time ago. We don't need to worry about it anymore. We're literally going to work really, really hard to put all of this information straight into your subconscious to override any fear factors that the amygdala might be bringing up. So it doesn't just work for your nightmares, it's all part of how we deal with the trauma response in hypnosis and the therapy that I do. So I really hope that helped you. I've given you information about what you can do on your own what you can do to calm the amygdala, to heighten these frontal cortexes again. And hopefully I've given you an understanding about what's going on for you, which is always my intention. If you're interested in having a session with me, talking to me more about your dealing with your whole traumatic experience or a part of it through RTT, then just contact me. When this is done, I'll put the link to my calendar in the comments. And please leave me your comments and questions. I know a lot of people, because this is very personal, a lot of people do send me private messages, and that's absolutely fine too. So just whatever works for you, any questions, queries, and let me know how you get on. If you start to put some of these in place and you find that they're really, really useful to you, then obviously that's what I really, really want for you. Okay, so I'll leave that with you. Obviously the replay will be in my feed. You can comment, you can watch it, and just let me know how you go on. But I really, really hope this is just hugely beneficial for you, because that's all I want for you. All right, have a great weekend. And I'll be back with my lives next week. Oh, and if you've got anything you particularly want me to cover in my lives, I've got a whole list of topics, but they're for you. So if you have things you want me to cover, message me and I'll do my best to do that for you. Okay, have a great weekend. Catch you next week.